I'm going to go ahead and end the poll so that we can share the results. Do you want to share the results now, Tanetta, or do you want to wait?
Yeah, we can share them. We got the bulk of folks answering. All right, so the first one says, anyone who experiences a trauma will eventually have PTSD. So 94% of you are correct. That is a myth, right? So I don't know how familiar you are with this big old book. It's almost the size of a dictionary, but it's what clinicians use. It's called the DSM-5. And it's what we actually use to understand, the criteria of how someone even meets basically the eligibility for a diagnosis. And in that DSM-5, first of all, to even be diagnosed with PTSD, you need to be showing your symptoms for at least a month. So anything between a month or before a month, it actually could be considered something called acute stress disorder. So in the type of trauma you experience too could have a heavy impact on whether or not you even, reach the criteria for PTSD or acute stress disorder. But I also would add, some people have a delayed onset with their symptoms. So it might be, 6 months or later, and that would just be, delayed onset PTSD. So it's not guaranteed that you will even ever meet the criteria for PTSD. So good job. All right, number 2, trauma and conditions like PTSD only impact people who had a near-death experience. 100% of you got that right and said myth. Does anyone want to come off mute and take a stab at why that is a myth? Or you guys still sleep? Didn't go in for that second cup, huh?
I'll take a stab.
Okay, Mary, go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, I was gonna say one of the criteria also includes even secondary knowledge of traumatic experiences. So, for example, being a witness or a bystander to somebody else's near-death experience, and then other traumatic experiences that may not necessarily be a near-death experience also counts as traumatic or trauma as it relates to a PTSD. So sexual assault would be another example of something like that.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing, Mary. Yeah. So another piece of that is it could be serious injury. So for this one, it's all about perception. So, I could be sitting in my classroom and, be a student and look out the window and see a car accident. And if I, internalize that and my perception of it, was my body responds to it just as if, I was actually in the car accident, I might be able to meet the criteria for PTSD, emphasis on might. But also we are thinking about, family members that might be having some secondary or vicarious trauma. So that was a really good summary. It could be a near-death experience. It could be threatened death. It could be serious bodily injury, any number of things. So good job. Let's look at 3. Post-traumatic stress disorder only impacts soldiers. Okay, so we've got a couple people learning something from this. That is a myth. It does not only impact soldiers. So similar to what we just talked about in, the near-death experience, it doesn't have to be a combat soldier or a combat veteran or anyone that has actually served in any of our branch of military. Many people get diagnosed with PTSD. Children under the age of 6 can be diagnosed with PTSD. So, and anyone, all the way up until, 100 plus could be diagnosed with PTSD. So good. Let's go on to number 4. So post-traumatic stress disorder occurs immediately after a traumatic event. So if you were paying close attention to what I said earlier, you know the answer to this one. So that one is also a myth. So PTSD, again, it could happen immediately, right? But even if it happened immediately, so if you were in a traumatic event today and you started showing symptoms tomorrow, you actually couldn't be diagnosed with PTSD. You would probably be diagnosed with an adjustment disorder or something like acute stress. It's got to be at least 30 days. So if it's been at least 30 days from the traumatic event, then you could be diagnosed with PTSD. But also, as I said earlier, it could take months before you are even, experiencing the full range of symptoms and criteria necessary to meet the, DSM-5 diagnostic criteria. All right, so we got a couple more. So I want to hear from someone that answered number 5 with that. And I forgot to say, this is a judgment and safe zone. We've got a couple counselors. I see some familiar faces up here. So if anything is triggering, or if we're talking about some sensitive material, feel free to, send me a private message or send Brandon a private message, and we can put you in the waiting room and come check on you. Or you can email us on the side, but this is a safe space, so there's no judgment. Hopefully this is a good learning environment. But if anyone that answered fact for number 5 feels comfortable, I'd love to hear from you on, what made you answer fact for number 5, which is once diagnosed with PTSD, the symptoms last forever. Anyone?
Good afternoon, all. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
I can hear you.
Okay, great. So a little bit of history. I retired from the Army, 20 years. One of my civilian jobs, I worked for a auto auction company. Went to Desert Storm, never had any symptoms, any problems, nightmares, or anything with PTSD. About 5 years after managing the auto auction company, started experiencing the normal nightmares, fatigue, jumpiness, and so forth. And this lasted for about 6 months before I started saying to myself, what's going on? Something's not right. After talking to different counselors, my trigger was with smells. The auto auction that I worked for dealt with total loss vehicles, crashes, burns, where the burns of the vehicles and flesh was triggering my brain, which put me back into like Afghanistan and Iraq. And that was my trigger. So it was almost 15 years after I had been deployed, which was very odd to me, experiencing this firsthand. It was like, why now? So it was, since then I have moved on from the auto auction, and my symptoms have they're there, but not as frequent. So it's a little bit more manageable.
Well, thank you for sharing, and thank you for your service. We really, really appreciate that. So I think you presented some good information and an opportunity for me to expand just a little bit. So there's a difference in symptoms lasting for many years, or being dormant, if you will, and then being triggered and kind of brought to the forefront, versus someone who received treatment and, whether or not they responded to the specific treatment they received, or if they had to try multiple different treatments. There is a difference in that. And I think the goal of this question was to highlight that you do not have to experience the extreme symptoms all day, every day, for the remainder of your life, right? Recovery, we hear that term a lot when we think about substance use, but one of the things I'm going to speak about today is even with mental health, you can be in recovery and you don't have to experience those symptoms, forever. There are supports out there, there are resources, there are multiple different treatments that you can access that can address those symptoms. And then just like you shared, Mr. Duncan, sometimes they will subside, they'll be manageable, and you won't think about them, on a day-to-day. So awesome. So let's go ahead and do the last one so we can jump into the rest of the presentation. All people diagnosed with PTSD have the same symptoms. Nobody fell for my trick. That is obviously a myth. There are so many different ways that PTSD or any mental health diagnosis could manifest and present itself. Depends on age, gender, experiences, your different backgrounds and other, aspects of your life. So everyone did an amazing job with that poll. Someone I see. Okay, yes, somebody had a clarifying comment in the chat. Thank you. All right, so jumping back in to recognizing signs and symptoms. So, like I mentioned, anyone could do, a quick search on the internet and learn a little bit more about the presentation or the signs and symptoms of, major depressive disorder or generalized anxiety. But I really want to take some time and emphasize that you really want to be looking for a change. So whether it's you or loved one or someone is sharing with you, you want to be looking for a change in behavior in multiple environments, right? For any of these things listed on here. So when I say 3 environments, I mean home, work or school, depending on, which one you are involved in, and community. So any community engagement, involvement, clubs, or, religious communities that you participate in, you really want to look for a change. So for example, somebody that is quiet and withdrawn, that may be their natural disposition, right? If they become extremely, the type of person that is isolating, or if they start to, become more talkative and it seems sudden and they're doing this in multiple settings, that is when it could be a warning sign, right? You also want to look at the physical, emotional, behavioral, and thoughts. So physical could be things such as, like stomach aches are starting, headaches, it could be gastro, it could be neuro in the head and the brain. It could be respiratory. Maybe they're having trouble breathing, or it could be cardio, their heart skipping a beat, or it could be any number of things for physical. A lot of times we don't, especially in young children. So if you have a young child and maybe mom or dad has just deployed and they, suddenly they start visiting the nurse more, they're having more tummy aches or headaches, or they're having trouble sleeping at night. Those could be warning signs. But again, you want to look at the impact of the change, right? Is it negatively influencing their ability to do what they typically would do? Similar for emotional, it could be their mood, it could be an increase in guilt, it could be a lack of emotion. For behavior, it could be that crying, starting to be more avoidant, picking up a habit they hadn't had before, whether it be tobacco or an illicit drug. And it could be, thoughts where that might be, they're starting to have some, delusions that would be on the more extreme end, or it might be something subtle where they start to become more pessimistic or more rigid, meaning, if something goes off in their day or their routine, they're starting to have a very big response where maybe normally they were more flexible. So again, there's different categories. You can be the assessor, because the idea is you'd be noticing these things about somebody that you care about or have some type of interaction with, whether it be professionally or just on a day-to-day basis. And then we have some NSSI. So has anyone ever heard of non-suicidal self-injury? Is that term familiar to some people? I see some head nods. So for those that may not be familiar with it, I think if you are familiar with things like, cutting or burning, those seem to be more common, like when you're watching the TV shows or the movies. But non-suicidal self-injury could be any intent to harm yourself to escape some negative feelings. So some people restrict their diet, so they eat less or they eat more, they overeat on purpose. Some people will bang their head on things. Some people will do cutting. Some people will do burning or pinching, picking, poking. I met someone that would pluck out all their eyelashes. There is a separate diagnosis from that, but just in and of itself, intentionally hurting themselves to escape a pain they can't necessarily articulate just yet. Any of those things could be considered non-suicidal self-injury. That could be a warning sign. What I would take a moment and emphasize is any of these things by themselves may not be a diagnostic, criteria, or it may not be time to sound the alarms. We've got to take the whole situation into consideration. And finally, suicidal ideation or homicidal ideation. And a little later, I'm going to talk to you about active versus passive ideation. But suicidal ideation is, thinking about, talking about, considering ending your life, or homicidal, hurting someone else or ending someone else's life. All right, everybody with me? I didn't put anyone to sleep, right? Not yet. So let's talk about some treatment options. So because today is just very introductory, on the next slide, I'm going to actually teach you some quick de-escalation techniques that you can walk away today and use immediately. So we can go ahead to the next slide. So if you notice any of those signs and symptoms from the previous slide, or maybe, you see someone, having big explosive outbursts, because that's the way most people like to depict PTSD, for if you identify as a male or you present as male, a lot of times they will say, this is one of the signs and symptoms, or even of depression, any of those things on the previous slide. Or maybe you're having a lot of anxiety, lots of, rapid heartbeat, sweating, you can't really focus, any number of things these de-escalation techniques could help with. Okay, so I'm going to teach them to you. And if you're comfortable, I want you to practice them. But the first one is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding exercise. So that is, people kind of remix this a bunch of different ways, but the way I like to do it is, if somebody is getting worked up, if you see them escalating, you ask them to make eye contact with you and identify 5 things in the room that they can see. So if you're comfortable, look around your room, identify 5 things that you can see, then identify 4 things you can touch, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and then for 1, some people do taste, but I like to do, take a deep breath, 1 big deep breath, right? So that is a quick de-escalation technique you can use with anyone, any age. It usually works pretty well. The other one is the 4, 7, 8 breathing technique. So for this one, you have to close your lips and you would inhale through the nose for 4 counts. So you can go ahead and try that out. And then once you've done that for 4 counts, you hold it for 7 counts. And then you actually exhale with the whoosh for 8. So it'd be breathe in for 4, hold for 7. I'm going to abbreviate for time. And then on that 8, it would for 8, count 8. Really helps. There's lots of science behind that one. The third one is one of my favorites, bilateral stimulation. So this is, so in our brains, we have this thing called the corpus callosum. It connects the right and left side of our brain. We need both sides of our brain to be able to walk and talk at the same time, right? We need both sides of our brain to be able to, for me to be able to speak to you, pay attention to this PowerPoint, look down at my notes, try and be coordinated. I need that part of my brain. Sometimes when we get overwhelmed, stressed out, me, if I was feeling super, super nervous, it would shut down on me, right? And our brain is like a computer. If I needed to jumpstart that, I could do what's called bilateral stimulation, which is moving both sides of my body at the same time. So if somebody is really worked up, if they're starting to escalate, there's a couple different things you could do with them. You could take them on a walk, of course. You could take them jogging. You could do some jumping jacks. But if that's not realistic, you could just do some simple tapping. So I'm going to show you the butterfly tap real quick. So you'd cross your hands over your chest, and feel free to do it if you'd like. And you can just tap, 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 tap. You can go fast. You can go slow, whatever you need to do, right? There's another old school one I like. Usually when I work with teachers, they've heard of this one called crossing the midline. So for that one, kids usually like to do this one because it looks a little funny. But you put your arms out in front of you with your palms facing down. Then place your palms out, make them touch, lock your fingers, then bring in through here. Doing something like that is a quick way to restart the brain. And guess what? You're focused on trying to get that right. So you're not going to be able to get all caught up in your head anyway and keep escalating further and further and further. So awesome. So those are 3 quick ones. Hopefully you could take that away today and use it immediately for yourself or teach someone else. But the last thing I wanted to talk to you about is a safety plan. So a lot of times you hear like professionals talk to you about safety plans, but guess what? You can create one on your own, right? It's best to do these when you're in a neutral state, when you're not already worked up. And it doesn't have to be for individuals that have non-suicidal self-injury or a history of suicide or homicide, right? It could be for anyone. So if you have a history of getting really, really mad and yelling and cursing and screaming, you might need a safety plan on how to redirect that behavior when it's happening. it would be awesome to create that with, loved one, including unique songs, activities for you to do. And then when you have that on hand and you share it with the people that are in your, you come in contact with the most, they can refer back to that, really quickly when they need to figure out how to bring you back down if you are, having a particularly rough day. Good on that? All right. So let's talk about some other types of treatment. So if you need something more in depth, like these de-escalation things aren't working, we can look at some individual or family therapy. So there's some pros and cons to both. I work in this field, I do therapy, but I also understand that therapy is not for everyone. You've got to be ready. You've got to be committed to the process, or it might not have the type of impact that you would like. So individual therapy, of course, you get that one-on-one, you get someone that's non-biased, you get that confidentiality. Some people don't love it because it can be intense. They don't get that group or input or shared experience that they might with group therapy or family therapy. So, it's an option. Then you have family therapy. Again, you could have your family participate. You've got, shared understanding amongst the that you spend the most time with, that, this is confidential therapy. You can have that additional support if needed. It can be time consuming. It can take, it can be some difficulties to get schedules to align. Again, drawbacks. It works for some people, works for it doesn't work for others. At the very end, I'm going to share some different resources we have at Western Tidewater that is specific to individual and family therapy, but just things to keep in mind. On the next slide, we have some specific types of treatment that anyone experiencing those signs and symptoms we talked about earlier may benefit from. So it could be some CBT. That seems to be one people are most familiar with. Anybody heard of cognitive behavioral therapy? But we also have DBT, which is one that is maybe a little bit less familiar to just people that might not be in the field, but that is dialectical behavioral therapy. It's similar acronym to DBT, but to CBT, but it's a little bit more structured. That one involves some individual therapy and some skills training. And usually if you are doing by the book DBT, your counselor will give you access to them in between sessions for some on the spot coaching. So if it's something very specific in particular that you are struggling with, usually you can call your counselor or coach or whoever is working on that team providing the DBT to get some, in the moment support. EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing therapy. Even counselors that practice EMDR don't usually say the whole acronym, but the biggest takeaway to know about EMDR is it takes present day issues. So for example, let's say you were in a traumatic car accident and now you can't drive. So it takes a present day issue like your inability to drive. You bring that in, your therapist helps you to access some memories connected to that current day problem. And then it uses eye movements to help desensitize your reaction to the trauma. So if you can't drive in the present day because you've been in a traumatic car accident, it helps you to desensitize the memories attached to that car accident so that in present day, you can do things such as drive or get to, accomplish whatever task you need to. So that's the easiest way I can explain to you EMDR. If you have questions, there'll be some time, but these are good modes of modalities of treatment you can look into if you or a loved one, feels like they might meet the criteria for any of those diagnoses we talked about earlier. And then of course, there's always medication, and research shows, medication on its own is no better than just therapy on its own. A lot of times people use it in combination. They use medication along with therapy to get the very best results. And then we've got some less common treatments up here: hypnotherapy, acupuncture, and Reiki therapy. So if you've never heard of Reiki, which most of the time when I share this with people, I haven't heard of that one. But basically it's an energy exchange. So I definitely encourage you to look into that one if you've never heard it. Like if you are still on the fence and you're not sure about alternative medicine, that's a good one to start with. Am I breaking up? I just got a message. My
Your audio is cutting in a little bit.
internet
Out
is
a little bit.
unstable. Can you hear me?
You're breaking up a little bit, Tanetta.
Okay.
Maybe if you stop sharing
Is this
video
any
for
better?
a moment.
Uh-oh. Am I back?
Yeah.
Any better?
Sounds better.
Okay. We only got a few more slides anyhow. Oh. Okay. Did this help? Okay. At least I have a picture. All right. So some additional things to think about, because again, I meet many people that aren't sure that actual clinical talk therapy is for them. Someone shared with me they are certified in Reiki. That is awesome. So there's some people in here that if we have some questions later, they might want to jump in and answer it. But so some additional considerations. So maybe clinical or talk therapy might not be for you, or maybe you are, a family member and you have been experiencing some secondary or vicarious trauma. A lot of times those words are used interchangeably. But technically they are there's some subtle differences. So secondary trauma, it's typically when you work in the field or you work directly with someone that has experienced some type of trauma. And then you get that emotional stress after hearing firsthand what someone has been through. Excuse me. Whereas, and that could be, isolated. It could be that you heard that, experience only once, where vicarious trauma, if you look up the straightforward definition, it's repeated exposure after, empathetic engagement with people that have experienced trauma. So an example might be if you worked at a domestic violence shelter and you stop believing that healthy relationships are possible, that is likely a result of vicarious trauma, right? Like you are responding to that repeated exposure. Whereas, secondary trauma might be you start to have symptoms of PTSD yourself. So it's a subtle difference, but we're talking about it. That if you are experiencing either one, however, you might start to consider and ask yourself, do I also need to talk to someone? Do I also need some type of therapeutic intervention, even if it's not, talk therapy? And, also it's a good time to chat about some dependence, and especially those that are, active duty dependents. There's so many different types of adjustments that have to be made, when you have a loved one leaving for deployment or returning home. That reintegration is difficult. A lot of times, I saw two young sisters and their father was out on deployment. And when they were away, mom, ran the household. When he was away, mom ran the household very specifically. And then when dad would return, everyone had to prepare, like emotionally prepare for weeks for that readjustment, right? Because you have to support that loved one that just finished, working away from home, doing a multitude of different things. So it's actually a lot. And if you decide to get professional treatment, that could be helpful in just preparing for that change. And sometimes it's sudden, sometimes you don't know. So just something to definitely think about. All right. So the next couple slides are actually our last two slides, and we are going to be talking about suicide and homicide. So again, if this is a sensitive topic area or if anyone is triggered, just please
Tanetta, we lost you again.
feel free to send a private message to Brandon, ask to be put in the waiting room or whatever you need to do. If you need to step away and come back, but it's very important, and I want to normalize having this conversation.
Hey, Tanetta. Tanetta, can you hear me? Right. Hold on just 1 second, folks. We'll see if we can't get Tanetta's connectivity back.
Am I back? Can you
I
hear
heard
me?
that. Yep, I can hear that.
Yep.
I think we lost your whole part about potentially if somebody needed to be moved to the waiting room or any of that kind of stuff. So
Okay. Uh-oh. See, this is the bad part about Zoom. Can you hear me?
yep, we sure can.
Okay. I was just saying another prep that we were going to talk about some suicide, homicide, some stuff, and if that was a sensitive topic for anyone, to feel free to protect yourself. Judgment-free, safe zone. But I want to make sure we do have this conversation. I want to normalize for you all how to talk to someone about suicide if you need to, or suicidal ideations. So it's red flags are not always obvious, but there are some that we should mention today, which is some extreme isolation, a sudden shift. So if you have someone that has been experiencing some true despair, some deep depression, and then all of a sudden it starts to lift and they seem more joyful or just content, that could also be a red flag, a warning sign. Usually that could mean that somebody has made peace with their decision that they are preparing to, in their life. If they start to give away their belongings, or if you find a notebook and they've been writing letters or some alarming things, all of those things could be red flags, right? So I want to bust a myth for you. If you see any of those red flags, a lot of times people think, well, if I ask them about it, I might encourage them. That is a proven myth. That is not true. Research shows that actually asking someone directly could save their life. It could be the thing they needed to change their mind about making that decision. Okay. And I also wanted to just mention the difference between passive versus active ideation. So passive ideation could be thinking about suicide or homicide, but not making plans. It could be fleeting thoughts. So you might hear somebody say, I want to close my eyes and disappear, right? They're not necessarily saying I want to be dead or I want to die, but they want to be away from the pain. They want to be away from, the stress of it all. Or maybe they have thought about what would it be like if I wasn't here anymore, but they haven't made concrete plans, which would be active ideation. I'm thinking about ending my life. I'm contemplating, or I have made some plans. I've started to take action. Yeah, somebody mentioned describing it on a spectrum. Absolutely. And we can go on to the next slide. I see some things coming in the chat. So responding to suicidal ideation or homicidal ideation, please understand this is just this is the overview. We have lots of trainings as Western Tidewater on this topic specifically, but I want to give you an acronym that I actually borrowed from a different training that I do, but I want to tell you what the acronym stands for, and this could be really, really helpful. So it stands for assess. So all that stuff I talked about earlier about recognizing changes and differences, that is your assessment. So you can assess the individual by seeing, how their mood, physical, emotional, or anything has changed. You can listen non-judgmentally. You can give reassurance. That's what that first G is for. And that's very different than advice, right? So advice could be, you need to go to therapy, right? Or you should really think about going to counseling. Whereas reassurance could be, I'm here for you if you need to talk, or if you need a resource for a professional, I can connect you. Very different. The first E is encouraging professional help. And the second E is encouraging self-help, because like I mentioned before, not everyone might want to go to clinical talk therapy, right? So again, treat every situation seriously, even if you feel like it's passive ideation, you still want to take it seriously and intervene. Asking directly whether a person is suicidal or homicidal. Never leave that individual alone, and never agree to keep anything a secret. Right? All of those things could be the difference between life and death for someone. And then finally, I'm going to leave you with some resources. Of course, our presentation today, you're going to learn more about SMVF. Brandon is going to talk to you more about the crisis line and 988, but these things are up here as a resource if you're referring back to PowerPoint. We have 24/7 emergency services here as well. We have our same day access program here. So if you need family therapy, if you need individual therapy, we have counselors trained in EMDR, DBT, CBT, all of those things I mentioned on the earlier slide. We have functional family therapy, which is an evidence-based intervention type of family therapy. All of those you can gain access through that 758 number there. I also mentioned a mental health first aid course. That's where I borrowed the ALGE acronym for. Soon you'll be able to visit our website and learn about up and coming trainings that we have. And even now you can visit our website and go to resources and click training events. Continuously check back there. We have all sorts of trainings coming through whenever you need them. And that wraps up my overview before we transition to questions. Hopefully I didn't cut out too much.
I think we heard that whole last part. We heard that whole last part pretty well there, Tanetta. And I do want to circle back to one question, particularly in the chat that we didn't get to, if we could start off with that one. And it was regarding hypnotherapy, and just a question on whether or not that is an evidence-based practice. It actually came up in a session the other day, and she was wondering if there's any research on it. Have any?
There's research on it. It's not empirically proven. And there's, because you can go online and, just being honest, you can take like a course and then people can add that to their name and say, oh, I'm certified in hypnotherapy. So you kind of got, I'm going to turn my camera off too. So you kind of got to do your research, make sure the practitioner is reputable. There's lots of, you could do a Google search and find some of the arguments as an alternative form of medicine, but some people swear by it. Some people swear it was a difference between, being able to sleep. Some people have used it to quit, their tobacco or nicotine addiction. So, yeah.
And Paul shared some good information in the chat as well around what the National Institute of Health considers hypnosis to be. And so that information is there in the chat. So Paul, thank you for the number of resources you've shared so far. Do we have any other questions for Tanetta? I know she's going to have to probably leave us before we get to the end, and we do plan to leave a little bit of question and answer time all the way at the end of our webinar today, but anything specifically for Tanetta before we might lose access to her?
Yes, what I did not do, which I should have, is put my email address up there. One of the things I love doing, put it in the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love to interface with people and answer questions. It was quick. So the social worker / clinician in me, I could talk for hours on this stuff. So definitely give me feedback on, what you felt, what you'd like to learn more about, questions I can answer.
Can I ask a question? My name is Paul. How does this SMV effort at Western Tidewater overlap with the Gero crisis effort, also piloted by way of Western Tidewater, to include people with dementia and TBI and challenging behaviors?
That is an awesome question. I think my colleagues are going to, am I frozen again?
No, I've got it, Tanetta.
Okay. I think my colleagues are going to be able to answer that for you.
Yeah, actually, that's a really great question, Paul. So one of the things that we've been working on, particularly in Region 5, and has been to think about how we link together specialty resources across the board. So thinking about a central hub of services that includes crisis, and expertise on veterans and military families, as well as geriatric, traumatic brain injury, and other special populations. Combining that in a regional hub allows us for some economy of scale where we can reach out to those subject matter experts and incorporate their training into how we interact with folks every day, and making those resources in particular available to both the public and the private behavioral health systems to help with competency in each one of those areas. So everything from offering a training like we're doing today on this webinar and being able to share those resources to actually being available for direct consultation through our regional crisis services hub. We can link folks to those specialty experts and be able to provide those resources to folks.
May
Do we have
may
anything
I,
else for?
may
I'm
may
sorry.
I
Yeah,
offer one comment? Thank you for that response. This is a paradigm shift for the community services boards, i.e. the community mental health organizations here in Virginia. As a former head of the Virginia Brain Injury Council, we for years were arguing about trying to get more coverage through CSBs by way of challenge behaviors with TBI. And for many years, dementia was not on the radar. But how did this come about that finally CSBs are going to address challenging behaviors from things typically not addressed previously?
I think that's a great question. And I think it's that we're all seeing the patterns of where individuals go underserved. And if I'm to be frank a little bit about it, it's that we've started to recognize where we need to make investments in these systems. So for the longest time, many of things like traumatic brain injury or dementia are diagnostic criteria that didn't allow you to provide a mental health or other service. And so there really wasn't a stream there. So that was one of the things we recognized, particularly as we've put together regional services, and as STEP Virginia has gotten legs underneath it, it has been strengthening our community-based system to address specific gaps such as that. It's built off the CCBHC, or community certified community behavioral health clinic model, that expands access to services, in particular for treatment populations that sometimes fall into gaps or have historically fallen into gaps. And I think that's what has really energized a lot of the discussion around it and enabled us to offer some of the resources. I think the other thing that we're seeing is that as we look at a census crisis around our psychiatric hospitals and some of the difficulties that we have with placing individuals that have some of those unique needs, it helps us to also recognize how enhancing treatment services in the community can help us to reduce some of the census pressures across our state psychiatric institutions, and ensure that people have treatment in their own home communities, where they have more natural supports and are able to maintain more stability within their lives. So I think that's a great question, Paul. And I think it really is just a progressive movement towards some increased specialization and offering for those specific populations.
I would totally agree there, Brandon. And just to add to that, I believe, after the Clay Hunt Act, SAVE Act, there was definitely a recognition that the VA, which is, it's been handed a lot of complaints down through the years. I personally have never had a problem with the VA, but I'm not, everybody else's experience. And of course, there were things that happened, especially during a time of 20 plus years of combat and war, where we had veterans that were seeking services, and the community somehow needed to be a part of that, not just put it all on the VA. And after the Clay Hunt Act, you basically had a unanimous, there's not many things that our Senate comes together for unanimously, 99 to nothing vote, and realizing that we needed to step up and basically interact with the community service boards and make that an ongoing relationship.
Thanks for that comment. I just posted a link to the Commander Hannon Veterans Mental Health Act, which to my knowledge has not yet begun, but it is focused on integrating mental health services to a much greater extent between public and private situations, such as what we're talking about here. And that individual, after whom the act is named, was a veteran who died by suicide and was former commander of SEAL Team 2 based here in Hampton Roads. So we're starting an initiative to include EVMS and the Hampton VA, Norfolk Portsmouth Naval Medical Center, a whole bunch of partnerships here in Hampton Roads, Western Tidewater, to sort of feed off of this call for more public-private partnerships. So thanks for your comment. I didn't know about this Clay Hunt Act. I'll look that up.
Real quick. So
Sure, thank you.
I think I reached out to Mr. McNeill before. So I just retired in November, and you know, I was a senior enlisted leader over here, and I had multiple suicides and multiple attempts. So I'm very sensitive to this topic. And I will tell you, from our perspective, if I have somebody who comes in for us, it's giving suicidal ideations or something of that nature. The first thing we have to do is we send them to Portsmouth Naval Hospital, okay, to be evaluated. Once they're evaluated, if they're not an immediate threat, they're sent back to their unit. When they send back to me, they have a follow-up, sometimes out to 45 days before they can get them in for counseling. The problem, and what I would like to ask is any way in this evolution, and when I put in there, what part are we providing? There's a big gap between somebody who's actually cutting and somebody who's having, you know, just, to be honest with you, a lot of these kids, the majority of the kids around here just miss home. They miss family. They miss all this other stuff. That's what a lot of these guys are dealing with. So it's filling that gap between somebody's cutting the wrist and the 45 days of a follow-up. And I'm very passionate about this because I hear a lot of services. I just went on Fleet and Family Services. They have we have tons of phone numbers we can call, but let me tell you what happens when you call the numbers. We'll make you an appointment, and it's about 2 to 3 weeks down the line. What are we going to do to take care of those soldiers, sailors, Marines in that interim? That's my concern, because they're giving back to me who I don't have a clue what to do with them.
Could I comment, John? Thank you for
Sure.
sharing that. Where medicine in general, behavioral and physical falls apart in the community, we have great hospital kinds of programs and so on. So expansion of the community services for persons like yourself and others is important. And we need to get the DOD service members and families out of the DOD to a greater extent. Like you're seeing here, there are community service board opportunities that many people at Naval Medical Center Portsmouth probably don't know about. So increasing awareness of programs like this, and increasing, of course, the issues that relate to stigma. Stigma, of course, is one of the major barriers here. And in the military, particularly with special forces persons, stigma is even bigger. What suggestions do you have on reducing stigma and reaching out for help?
Well, the first thing is, I'll be honest with you, I've never heard of this before, but not to throw that down the thing. Like I said, I've got a list of phone numbers that I've called, and every one of them I set on the phone myself for these people. And they just, hey, we'll help you, but you really get no help. Just like them, we'll counsel your servicemen for like twice, and then they send them back to you. Again, I don't know what to do with them in the interim. And I promise you, I've had kids cleared on a Friday. And I think I told Mr. McNeill about this in the email. I had a kid cleared on Friday, sat in my office on Friday and said, I want to re-enlist. I want to stay in. Can you help me? I said, yes. He killed himself on the next day. So, you know, and the problem with that is it's also us identifying those issues. A lot of these, am I breaking up?
You're okay.
Yeah, a lot of these kids, and this is what I heard. I loved Miss Hassell's her example of the breathing and all that stuff. That's great. We do teach the breathing. I myself have taught that. We have the suicide class. I've taught the breathing technique, but I'm just going to be honest with you. These are 18. The majority of this population are 18 to 22-year-old. They're not going to hug themselves. They're not going to do all this other stuff. So finding ways to teach our servicemen and women to identify better methods of identifying these risks, and then ways that they can cope with the stress. The tapping, I think you mentioned something about that. That's pretty good. I think we can get them to do that. But some of this other stuff we're teaching, and like I also mentioned to Mr. McNeill in my email, what a lot of people don't realize is in my job, I interviewed a lot of these kids before they even joined the military. And all of them, for the most part, want to be a part of a team, right? They want to be a part of a group. So they join. And then they come to my unit and they're happy. They want to be here. But that lasts for about a good month. And then after that, they put their headphones on and they're in their room. They want to be isolated playing their video game. And try as we may to get them to do that team thing that they said they wanted to do, they don't want to do that. And I bring that up because when we talk about identifying, is John acting different today? Is John doing whatever? I have went through people's rooms and they don't even know who the roommate is. They don't know anything about the roommate. So that's not your problem. That's a them problem. That's what the military is trying to deal with. But what I'm bringing up here is if we want to make this program effective, I really do believe, I honestly believe this, that if we ingrained a little bit more with the military, and I can help facilitate that, if we ingrained ourselves with those guys and girls over there, worked with their professionals, and we could get in and watch, we have some of our mental health professionals here who know what they're doing, get in with their people and can help change the way we teach, because we're robotic over there. Change the way we teach and talk, we can really make a difference. But right now it's like we're over here and they're over there, and it's a bridge that no one's crossing.
No,
Yeah,
John,
I would agree with that. And it's definitely, there needs to be much more connectivity. And that's what this is really all about. Moving forward is making sure that we don't have 2 weeks to get somebody in when, we may have somebody like in your case that, it could happen immediately. And, there are, we're trying to make connections here with our counselors. There's also the Stephen A. Cohen Military Family Clinic that is over in the Virginia Beach area. That's a very good place. And there's the website for it right there, brought up by Lauren DeSimone over at the Barry Robinson Center. And basically these types of things, we have to be able to connect quickly. And it's kind of a good segue right now to what Brandon's going to be talking about here shortly with the new 988 system. It's, it's kind of heart-wrenching to see these young kids that basically don't see a way out. And part of it is that stigma. Part of it is that military, don't want to hurt my career kind of thing. Don't want to say anything to anybody. And we need to find a way to move forward for these active duty personnel, young people that, they don't want to destroy their career by saying, they're not fit right now for duty. And that's understandable, but we've got, where is that bridge? Right.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Whit. I think we'll slide into the next portion. One of the things I want to stress is that as we've talked about public behavioral health, and I think this is an important item to understand, is that your public behavioral health system should be marketed as a safe place for individuals to seek treatment, regardless of what their current active duty status is, what their veteran status is, all of those kind of things. We serve citizens that are in our communities, period. And so by accessing care there, it can be a confidential and safe place to go. And that's actually a great bridge into where I'm going to start on our crisis service system, because I'm going to do kind of an abbreviated version of, going over the whole crisis system. But I think it's important for us to know that there's a lot of access points. And when it comes to a veteran, there's really no wrong veteran, a family member, or an active duty service member. There's really no wrong door to approach crisis services. If you're in crisis, you should be able to walk in just about any door that you have. And that should be one of the things that we should be consistent in communicating as members of whatever community we're a part of, whether that be a CSB system, a private behavioral health provider, a hospital system, or involved in the military or veteran serving organizations. So I will try and pull this PowerPoint up and see if we can run through this. Okay, so I wanted to start off just with the array of there's like 400 phone numbers out here right now. And let's talk a little bit about each one of the different phone numbers and what it means and what's available, etc. So we'll start off with just the National Veterans Crisis Line. So this is an open crisis line that specifically is going to Veterans Affairs staff. It's tailored specifically for veterans in need, and it's the same phone number as the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, as you can see right next to it. But you press 1 instead of pressing 2, and it gets you to the Veteran Services. You can also text to 838-2855, and that's a text chat feature to be able to receive some of that very same counseling and support. And so that's there's really great Veterans Crisis Line cards, and I've given out my last one that I had with me. But they're great resources to carry around. You can put it in your pocket. You can slip it inside of a cell phone cover or whatever, and you have it if you ever need it, if you bump into somebody. And if you ever need access to those cards, if you let either Whit or myself know, we're happy to get those cards out to you. We can put them at your place of business. We've done that for CSVs around the region. And it's really a great resource to be able to kind of carry with you. There's also a National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And so that's 1-800-273-TALK, and you press 2 for just the non-veteran specific counseling support. By July of 22, that is supposed to switch over to just being able to dial 988. And there's trained crisis supports for the general population. It's not military or veteran specific, but it's still open to anybody that would like to call, regardless of your service status. One thing to know about it is routed to a regionally located call center, but it's based on your area code. And so this is important, especially for our service member and veteran population, that many of them have transitioned and not changed phone numbers. So I myself, while not military, I carry an 814 area code on my phone. So if I dial the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, I'm going to dial in and get Western Pennsylvania's version of the call center. And so they won't have as much knowledge of the local supports that might be available to me. And so that's where our Region 5 Crisis Call Center comes in. And we have a direct number into that call center. It's 757-656-7755. That goes directly to a call center that actually is able to dispatch specific supports throughout our eastern region of Virginia. Answered by the same National Suicide Prevention Lifeline staff that you would get from the box before that, but there's a guarantee that you get into Region 5's local resources there. And then finally, we have kind of what has been the standard for a long time is our 911 system. And while not specifically behavior oriented, whenever there's a case of imminent risk for life and safety and things like that, 911 is able to dispatch our EMS, our police, those kind of things. And as of 12/1, they're able to transfer calls to a regional crisis call center in the previous box. Some localities, there's 5 in the state of Virginia right now that are Marcus Alert communities. They're able to, at certain times of the day, dispatch mobile co-response teams directly from that 911 center. Virginia Beach in our region is the locality that has that capacity right now. And Hampton and Newport News are expected to come online as the second kind of area within our region sometime in this next calendar year. So wanted to go over those numbers and make sure people were aware of the pros, cons, and goods, bads, and indifference for each one of them. And I dropped this slide in just to help folks understand that crisis services have been an evolution for a long time in our country. Things started with the first free 24-hour crisis hotline way back in 1958. So, that was kind of where we started off. And we've identified some services and supports that help since that time. So CIT training, many of you might be familiar with that. That's training specific for law enforcement officers at handling behavioral health crises. And then kind of moving into the crisis now model, the advent of the 988 crisis hotline, and et cetera. When we start to talk about the regional crisis call center, as I mentioned earlier, that's a 24/7, 365 staffed call center with telephone, text, and chat capacity, air traffic control of where mobile crisis teams may or may not be available, That's operated in our region by Western Tidewater on behalf of all the regional CSBs in the public behavioral health system. Provide call follow-up and care navigation, so individuals may have their needs met just as a resolution on the line. There's follow-up provided for individuals to determine if they have additional needs, etc. They accept handoffs from 911 and obviously complete some initial level of care assessments and risk assessments while they're on that phone chat or chat. So this graphic is really just to piece together where Virginia is moving in terms of understanding some level systems related to Marcus Alert. So level 1 calls that come in, whether this is for if it comes into a 911 center that's a Marcus Alert community or into the regional crisis call center. We look at level 1 as those calls that need just crisis counseling at that time and maybe some linkage to ongoing behavioral health supports that are non-emergent. So they might need follow-up counseling, etc., but they can be resolved while they're on the line there. Our level 2 team or level 2 calls require somebody that to come out and visit somebody face to face and provide some direct intervention and support to the individual while they're right at that immediate moment. A level 3 is typically some type of a co-response team that involves a behavioral health professional with police officers or EMS. And that's for when there's questions around scene safety or maybe some medical concerns that might go along with what are the presenting behavioral health needs. And so people partner together and you have a primary behavioral health response in there. And a level 4 situation is one in which there's an immediate threat to life, health, and safety. And that's where police and emergency services make the immediate response, and then they may link back to a behavioral health session after that. In our region, we attach a care navigator to every one of those items to see if there's follow-up that needs to be had. So they review call data, they ensure that there's follow-up in our plans. So that is your quick, dirty, and hopefully informative breakdown of the crisis service system. My contact information is there. And by the way, I'll make sure that the slideshows that we've gone over today get out with everything to anybody that's registered for the training today. If there's anybody that needs them emailed to them, and you can use my email address and request a copy of the stuff if you weren't actually the one that registered for the training today. So I'll pause there for a moment and just ask if there's any questions that I could help answer.
I just posted some of the data that came from the DoD 2021 service member suicide rate, and noted that when adjusted for age and sex, in the DoD, more persons are younger and more persons are male. Suicide rates are not elevated compared to the general population, so that's really great. But nonetheless, Army has a higher rate. Number 2 is Marines, and the National Guard, Army National Guard, is number 3. You remember a couple of years ago, Army National Guard suicide rates, regardless of deployment or not, were off the charts. So there's been an improvement in that. But I do want to point out, particularly to the active duty people here, that when adjusted for age and sex, reservists have a better suicide rate than do the general population, less likely to die by suicide. And so too do dependents. Do the kids have a reduced suicide rate compared to the general population? I wondered if somebody could comment on what's going on with reservists and what's going on with dependents from best practices point of view.
And Paul, I think you probably have asked a question that I'm not sure we're equipped to answer today.
I've worked in reserve units before, and realistically what it is the most part, they get the same training as active duty, but they go out and they deal with their civilian lives a lot more. Yep. So I'll just tell you that's realistic what it is. As far as dependents, I don't know. I've had quite a few dependents, quite a few. I mean, a lot. I'm surprised with that statistics. A lot of dependents killing themselves, especially someone's like teenagers for some reason. And I think it's from the deployments, time away, the parenting, the stress, the coping. I've had that. It's off the charts from my experience. I've just seen so many of those teenagers kill themselves.
So I would say, Brandon, somebody just put in the chat that those individuals are less isolated. It isn't just a question of how isolated, it's a question about how integrated they are with other people from different walks of life. The more integrated you are, the more socially broad your network, the more resiliency you tend to acquire.
Thanks, Demetrius. Also wanted to attend to a quick comment in the chat, and it was from Sarah regarding her husband and National Guard unit and some of the barriers of soldiers not feeling trust with mental health community and things like that. That's going to serve as a great segue, honestly, to the next component I've got, which is to bring up our SMVF peer navigator. He did a quick video for us. And that's absolutely a barrier that we do recognize and that often is mentioned. And so part of Nabie's role as a peer navigator is he's somebody that's just lived combat experience, and he's a Navy corpsman, was embedded, as I understand it, with an Army unit when he was in Iraq. And he's got some really great experience in terms of what his military lived experiences are, and he's able to relate to a number of our veterans. He's in kind of one of those good age ranges where he's not too young, but he's not maybe as aged and mature as some other folks. And he goes out and honestly just does a lot of outreach. His job is really just to align with folks, and he's also had some history providing what was referred to as the Orders Home program, and it was based on a Veteran X, where there was an individual veteran that was unidentified that has certain needs, and then a group of veterans work through that and do that as a team together. So it works on some of that team building that the military is familiar with, and also a way to get veterans to support one another in a group format. So I'm going to, if it's okay with folks, I don't see any other questions that have popped up in the chat, and I don't think I see any hands raised right now. I'm going to transition to that video with Nabie so he can introduce himself. Again, he's at the VA right now with somebody seeking help from the VA, and so he's kind of supporting them through that. So he was kind enough to get a quick recorded message out for us to be able to share so that we could see his name and learn a little bit about those peer supports. Whit, was there anything I missed on that?
No, I think that you got a good picture of our peer specialist, Nabie. He definitely has that lived experience, and a very good question from Sarah that that is a problem throughout, and people have recognized that lived experience with a lot of veterans is very important for them to gain their trust. Absolutely.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and share this, and I would just ask if for some reason the sound does not come through, or if there's any problems with the clip, if you guys would just go ahead and feel free to unmute and interrupt me so that I can figure out whatever is going on. So we'll give this a shot, and if there's any problems, please let me know.
Hi, my name is Nabie Bangs. I am the Regional Veteran Peer Recovery Specialist here at Western Tidewater Community Service Board. Our goal here as peers is to provide an atmosphere of non-clinical services that support veterans and their family members, and how to identify and overcome barriers as they transition back into civilian life. We do this by connecting them to resources to help with issues such as substance abuse, mental health support, financial support, and educational services, and homelessness, just to name a few. And one of the ways that we do this is by providing one-on-one or group services in subject areas such as navigating return to civilian life, linkage to resources, employment, education, transportation, navigating the VA, and community involvement. We believe in identifying and eliminating barriers helps in creating a successful transition into civilian life. We want to make sure that veterans and their family members are receiving all services and benefits that they have earned. To get in contact with us and find out more about our services, please contact us at one of the email links at the end of the PowerPoint, or you can call the Veteran Crisis Line at 1-800-273-8255, option 1, and let them know that you are a vet or soon to be vet and are looking for veteran services. Thank you very much. You guys have a great day.
But I assume since nobody interrupted me that the audio and video all came through okay. Good. It's always a crapshoot when you try to use technology and you got 8,000 things running on your machine all at the same time. So happy that worked out. All right.
Can I just comment?
Yep.
A lot of social determinants of health were embedded in what was just said. That is, for example, housing equals health. If you're homeless and there's a disproportionate number of veterans who are homeless, that's not a good recipe for mental wellness. And we need to pay particular attention to race, ethnicity, gender identification, and all of that stuff, because not all persons are white men. And, we look at women veteran suicide rates, they're just really off the charts compared to those in the general population. So I like the idea of all of the messages that were included in that short video. And, coordinating services, easier said than done, but the VA has an amazing homeless program that a lot of people in the private sector could benefit from, as a simple example.
Yeah, thanks very much, Paul. I appreciate you chiming in there. And we'll make sure we pass that on to Nabie. We think he happens to be pretty great at what he does, and including all of that information in a short clip is a tough task. So much appreciated. So I'm going to turn the reins over to Whit to try to keep us on schedule here. He's got some things to go over, and I think a few video clips himself at some point through here. So I'll share up your PowerPoint slides, Whit, and it is in your court, sir.
Okay, thanks, Brandon. Yeah, we should have a survey to start off with here, just a short survey about, this is the very beginning here. It's about gun safety, med safety, and just a short survey. First one is, do you have guns in your home? Number 2, are your guns locked in a case? Number 3, do your guns have any type of either cable lock or trigger lock attached? Number 4, do you have guns in your home that are uncased and unlocked? And number 5, if you were prescribed a class 2 opioid drug for pain relief, would you have the proper medication lockbox to enhance its security? We'll give you a little bit of time. Looks like their answers are coming in pretty rapidly.
I know not everybody in the webinar gets this experience, but it's really fun to watch everybody's results pour in. It kind of feels like one of those TV shows where they're pulling people from the audience.
I think we've probably got about everybody who's still hanging on here on a Friday, but if not, go ahead and get your vote in quickly, and we'll start discussing these here. First of all, the number 1 question, do you have guns in your home? And about 2/3 of you have guns in your home, and that's probably a pretty good average, the national average at least, of people who are firearms owners. Are your guns locked in a case? About half and half there, 51% to 49%. Do your guns have any type of either cable lock or trigger lock? And this is basically just an additional security measure. And 31% said yes. I mean, that's about as secure as you can get. You can't get much more secure than to lock your guns in a case and to have locks on the weapon itself. Do you have guns in your home that are uncased and unlocked? And then the last one, if you were prescribed a class 2 opioid drug for pain relief, would you have the proper medication lockbox to enhance its security? And that's not that uncommon. Anybody who has a surgery, anybody who has some sort of major injury could be given an opioid to deal with the pain. And about 50% said yes, and about 50-50 there again. So, and these are just things to, make you think about, because I have seen situations where, both with guns and medicine, people who got a hold of them, that either family members or not a family member, somebody from a different, not even remotely related to them, or a neighbor had gone in and gotten both guns and medicine out of someone's home. So these are just some of the things, that basically make you think about, and something that was brought out of not just veteran suicide prevention, but everybody's suicide prevention, lock and talk, and gun safety, medicine safety, very, very important. It's not just, this isn't something that, we're trying to get across to people to as some sort of gun control or anything like that. It's just kind of common sense, that gun safety and is important. The recent tragedies of gun violence and mass shootings show that we need to redirect the way we think when it comes to gun safety. It's not a political statement. It's just every household needs to consider that as a priority. And I would imagine that many of the tragedies that happen do happen because something wasn't properly secured. I know most people that I served with and myself, my dad used to take me out back. We would shoot shotguns. We would do target shooting. I've shot everything in the Navy from a 9mm to a Gal 16 50 caliber machine gun. And everybody in here who's been in the military knows how important gun safety is. And that's something that should be impressed on the civilian population also. And it's not a cavalier kind of thing to go out and treat guns as if they're some sort of macho object. And I think that's part of the big problem in today's society. Before we get into the lock and talk, though, I'd like to thank Michelle Johnson from Virginia Veterans Family Services, Rebecca Texter, Jordan Brooks. They basically are the wheels that make lock and talk work. And Megan Flaherty, the VA healthcare system here in Hampton Roads. They basically helped me out finding the proper types of gun locks that we need to put on weapons in order to secure them for us, our families, and anybody else. These are the medicine box, vaults, med boxes, and we'll talk about these and how they're used here in just a second in some of the YouTube videos. Rebecca and Jordan trained me and countless others on lock and talk and the best practices that have been gleaned to work. And we do appreciate that here at Western Tidewater, and we want to keep it rolling. They were kind of the ones that blazed the trail with lock and talk and getting to know shop owners and what works and discussing gun safety and suicide prevention. They know the right gear to buy, and we're trying to stick right with that same policy. And first of all, let's talk about, let's go ahead and show the first video there concerning what lock and talk is.
We have a little bit of everything ranging from tools, electronics, firearms, musical instruments, a wide variety of things to sell. Different from various pawn shops, as we've been told by our customers, which is an amazing feeling for us, because it makes them want to keep coming back to us. BB's Pawn, we are a Lock and Talk family. I've been around firearms and family being on medications for, most of my life, and I know there has been an increase over the past few years involving overdoses or suicide with firearms. The first time I heard of the Lock and Talk program, I went to a seminar at the Stanton Library. I approached Becky, who was speaking on behalf of Lock and Talk Virginia, and told her a little bit about where I work and what we deal with here at the shop and how I think our shop could benefit. It really opened my eyes as to what the program had to offer the community as far as prevention methods with firearms or with medications or anything to keep them safe. All handguns are required by law to leave with gun locks on them. If they don't understand how they work, then we do show them how it works, whether it's a cable lock that goes down through the slide of a semi-auto or a trigger lock that goes around the trigger housing of a revolver. So we definitely educate them if they don't know how to do it. We do have the poster hanging by our front door with the suicide hotline and warning signs as far as helping out a friend or family member. We do have brochures from Lock and Talk Virginia, magnets to stick on the refrigerators, but we also have brochures with firearms and suicide prevention, which we've actually had a few people ask about them and thank us for having these displayed, because they may have known somebody in crisis and was wanting to help them out. It's an amazing program. It really is. For us to be able to educate people in gun safety and keep people safe, it means a lot to me, personally. It is rather difficult to talk about. I am actually 16 years a survivor myself, involving firearms. And I feel like I've, been given another shot at being a better person as far as giving back to the community, and helping people that need it. BB's is happy to be a part of the Lock and Talk family. Keeping people safe with supplying trigger locks and everything and educating them on gun safety is a big thing for us. So I think it's for sure making a difference. As far as saving one life, it really does. And that one life that it has been saved goes on to the next. That's what I live for. That's why I'm here.
Yeah, it's a great statement for the program from a Mr. Adrian Stacy. And we've got several gun shops like that in the area that we've already come across that are fully on board, very much looking forward to helping veterans in any way they can. Crossfield Tactical out of Suffolk, the Suffolk Gun Works in Suffolk, that's down on the Main Street area there. That's like walking in a little museum there. And they know their stuff there. They know their gun laws. They know, they're very serious about helping veterans too. They're both veterans themselves. Suffolk Pawn and Guns, they've been great. A big shout out to Nabie helping me with the gun works, and also Tanya Jones. She's been great. She's been very active and working with several of these shops, and her bright smiling face has lit them up there. So we basically we've been doing good working with them, and they let us put our material out right there where you sign up for the for your gun registration. And so that's been great. What is Lock and Talk? What Lock and Talk is promoting the importance of limiting access to lethal means. And that's priority number one in President Biden's, plan to help bring down veteran suicide. And some of the things that Mr. Paul pointed out earlier, that veteran suicides are coming down. That is good news. And we need to keep that trend going. That's definitely something that over the last 20 years it's been a rough road for many of our veterans and the people who've committed to serving their country. So promoting importance of limiting access to lethal means a person with suicidal thoughts by providing these free safety devices, and that's something, and medication devices. It's also providing education for when someone may be mentally unwell. We've had several gun shop owners say that, you know, they're willing to send some of their personnel to get that type of training. The talking, of course, is going through counseling, going through, and also the education portion of it. The governor's challenge points out the 3 C's, and I think kind of what we're talking about today and getting this forward, and, you know, this definitely shouldn't be a one-time deal. We should be interconnected quite a bit, but the 3 C's are care, provision of accessible and culturally competent behavioral health services, connecting, bringing military, veteran specific and community services together, forming a systemic partnership, and communicating. Communication's huge. Educating service members, veterans, and their families on resources and community services and their providers on military culture and suicide prevention, best practices. So these things, you know, are always constantly ongoing, a work in progress. And, you know, especially when we put our military in high tempo combat operations. And that's something we need to consider, and we need to be there for them. The data has shown that, you know, your age grade, or your age grades, your types of ages where your suicide is most prevalent is typically in the young years, the young people that are in these combat roles. We've had 72% since 2000 of veteran suicide rates are by firearm, and that's much higher than that of the normal civilian rate. And that's another reason why lock and talk, securing these firearms, is so important. What lock and talk is not, it is not a second rights pro or anti Second Amendment rights program. It's not a gun control program. It is strictly a suicide prevention and gun safety program. And we certainly appreciate the gun shops that understand that. They love working with veterans, and we're going to establish some ongoing relationships there. I can totally tell they're already, and several of these, Crossfield Tactical was giving us resources. They were giving us things that they do for veterans already. So, you know, those are things that we're proud of, and we're going to continue working with. Big thanks to those gun shops. They know the importance of gun safety, gun training, knowing the law, and mental health training, and the interactions that go with that. All righty. Let's see that. Okay, we can go ahead and do in case anybody hasn't seen gun cable locks and applied, we'll just do a quick YouTube on that. Well, that's pretty much got it for, I'm going to skip that last one because that one covers how to put a gun lock on, and it's pretty much the same for a rifle also. Any questions for me concerning lock and talk?
We do have a cut or a question in the chat about if, you know, could the cable lock still be cut? And And I think that the important messaging around that is of course you could cut the cable, you can use the key to unlock it, because it's not like you take the key and throw it away, though that can be a strategy that somebody could use if they were really looking for somebody to hold on to that for them. But the important messaging around it is that what you're doing is creating a delay in the act of attempting suicide. So you're creating an extra step that somebody has to go through, and the evidence would suggest that that small delay can be a protective factor in preventing the actual attempt in and of itself. Also, there's a lot of information out there regarding what cognitive functioning is when you are at that point of heightened concern and distress. And so even just kind of trying to manipulate through the opening of the lock and some of those kind of things, those are protective measures that have been pretty successful. So just want to make sure that we addressed that that question that came up in the chat.
Right. Limiting access doesn't mean you're gonna, it's foolproof. You're not gonna be able to, but it just like Brandon is saying there, that 10 seconds it takes for you to decide you're gonna take that key and take another step. It's just another step that you've got to think about. And, you know, sometimes that is the step that makes you stop. And, you know, that's definitely, plus all the other reasons to, you know, I can see there's a large number of people in this group who understand how important locking your guns at home is. And, you know, you don't want your gun, and none of the gun shop owners want their guns that they sell to become part of somebody's tragedy. And they're, you know, the ones we've talked to have been very, very good, very forward people. All right. Any other questions on lock and talk? Oh yeah, the couple of good things about the gun laws that are out there. You do have some gun laws, new Virginia gun laws that came about in the last couple of years that are definite reasons to have locks on your gun, especially anybody with under a substantial risk order, no guns for people under protective orders. You do have to basically give up your gun at that point, anybody under these orders. And so it would be wise to secure your gun if you're having somebody else hold that gun for you. You can go on to the next slide. The other law is tougher penalties on unsecured loaded guns. This new law sets down stricter penalties for recklessly leaving a loaded unsecured gun in a way that endangers the life or limb of a child under 14. Sounds like common sense, and for most everybody it is, but sadly that there's a reason that law is in place. You know, I think the age should probably be older than that, because we won't even let a child 15 drive a car yet by themselves. But you know, that's one of those things. You know, there's always going to be an argument on those kind of things, but definitely important. If you put the gun locks on or secure the guns in a locked case, it's a moot point. The child's secured from that, and you have access. All righty. Moving on. Any other questions on lock and talk? If not, we're just going to move on real quick to, we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to buzz through this. We're pretty excited about getting our website, Region 5 Public Behavioral Health and Crisis and Support website up and running. It's not up yet. It will be soon. You can see some of the areas there, Western Tidewater SMVF web resources that we're going to put on the SMVF page. We'll have links to lock and talk and suicide prevention, educational opportunities. Those will be, and one thing about the lock and talk and suicide prevention. Some of the areas and the people we'll have on there will be a couple of them very important. Virginia Veteran and Family Support. If you have anything to do with veterans, DVS and Virginia Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services, we will have links to them. The Virginia Veteran and Family Support Program provides resource referrals, care coordination, supportive services to Virginia's veterans, National Guards, Armed Forces, reserves, family members, and caregivers. And they work with all veterans regardless of discharge status. So any navigators out there, anybody who works with veterans, they are a very important point of contact. Michelle Johnson, and some of the people I mentioned previously today, Rebecca Texter, Jordan Brooks, they've all been great. When I ask them for anything, they are there with the answers. So good resource to have, and we'll have links to them. We're going to have links for educational opportunities, GI Bill opportunities. Some of our local community colleges are some of the best in the country. Tidewater Community College, and they've got veteran programs that are second to none. Tidewater College Military Benefits page, and Thomas Nelson Community College, another great community college. When people are transitioning, military members are transitioning, they've got great programs to get you right into the workforce. That brings me to employment opportunities. There's Virginia Values Veterans websites, Paralyzed Veterans of America website, career program. We'll have links to them. Ruan Transport, Cardinal Logistics. Those are just two places I've personally worked for in the transportation business, and I know how good they are to veterans and to everyone. They're great companies to work for. We'll have some links to them, and anybody else, anybody who is veteran friendly and has shown that, we will definitely have links to. Caretakers for veterans. A lot of good things out there for caretakers that they can access. Elizabeth Dole Foundation, Psych Armor, the Rosalind Carter Institute for Caregiving. We'll have links to all of those. Childcare for military families. That is something that when I came from Spain, serving in the Navy, I realized how lucky we were over in Spain, that basically we had someone we could drop our children off with, our two boys, at any time. And they were just great. They were super with kids. And it was one of those things. We got to America after our duty was done there, came back to the San Diego area, and it was like we were suddenly a very small fish in a huge pond, and it was very hard to find good, adequate childcare. And we went through several options. Some of them definitely I would not do again if we, but they were, we didn't have any trouble, but it, you definitely want links to good childcare for our military members. One of the most absolutely necessary services for military families, having access to safe and affordable childcare. Some of the available traditional methods around the area, of course, the VA, we're going to have links to them, the Hampton Roads Healthcare, Stephen A. Cohen Military Family Clinic. Somebody put that up a little earlier. The Barry Robinson Center. Somebody was Lauren DeSimone put some links up earlier. They are a great center, especially for families that have needs for children 12 to 17. They have basically a kind of life skills program, a live-in life skills program that gets some of these, and they're very military family oriented. Something to think about. There you go. Thank you, Lauren. She just put it up on the chat line there. And available non-traditional methods I've seen come up on the Trails of Purpose, equine horse therapy, veterans moving forward, service dogs for veterans, mutts with a mission. That sounds great right there. Those are service dogs for veterans, and that's a resource I found from one of the gun shops and one of the guys that work there. So you get out and talk with some of these folks, and you just learn more and more. And other veteran resources, the Travis Manion Foundation, a community resource named for Travis Manion, Navy SEAL, who served in Afghanistan, lost his life in Afghanistan, and he's amazing program they have there. And Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors, TAPS.org. So basically, that's kind of it in a nutshell. As far as questions for this now, I can please feel free. The last one there is request and suggestion links. And that we're going to leave it. If anybody has any good ideas that we need to be telling our veterans, anybody has good resources that need to be out there, by all means, send it to us. And if I see something, I've been looking around, seen a lot of the other CSBs. Some of you guys are doing great. You've got great programs out there. And I can tell, I guess I'm cheating a little bit. I'm seeing some of your stuff too, but hey, if you want to cheat, just give me a call. If you like the old saying, you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. And I'm going to basically give you all the information you need to help veterans. This is one of those things that they need the help, and let's get it out to them. My closing remarks, I'd just like to say, everybody have a blessed Christmas. And, keep the folks in the Kentucky and Tennessee area in your hearts and prayers, because they've been through a rough time recently, especially up there near the Fort Campbell area. But thanks. And I'm going to turn over to Brandon to close it out here. Sure appreciate everything.
That's a tough act to follow, Whit. I'm going to try to do my best. I want to take an opportunity. One of the things that we need to work on is probably some stakeholders groups. There's been a lot of good information shared in the chat. That's the part of these things that I actually almost always most appreciate is the willing contributions and people that take this as a serious passion. Those thought leaders are, you all as thought leaders are what generally makes a good system a better system. And so if you would like to drop your name and email address into the chat and indicate if you have interest in some work that Whit will be doing around engaging stakeholders and running a stakeholders group around all of this, we would love to have that. We also will take any suggestions that you have for future comment or for future content and some upcoming items right in the chat. We'll take all that information back, compile all those results, sort through it, give Whit a headache, and then ultimately give him some marching orders so he has things to keep him busy over the next few months. So very much appreciative of all of you all. And thanks to our presenters. We are actually ending something, within 5 minutes of when we expected to end something, which never happens in the public behavioral health system, just so all of you are aware. And so that's a championship moment for the CSBs. And if you have any questions, Whit and myself and a couple others might still be online for a few more minutes. We can entertain questions, but I don't want to be that barrier between you and your weekend. So thank you all for joining us today, and we appreciate your input.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Hey, Whit. Real
Hey,
quick.
John.
Hey, like I was saying earlier, I'm trying to figure out what I will gladly help facilitate anything I can. And like I said, I just retired. So I'm in the kind of the network over here on the Naval Station Norfolk. And I can kind of get us in the weeds as far as who facilitates, who does the training over there, what they use. I'm really up to date on their procedures. And I would like to find that, like I was saying, that bridge. I don't know, Brandon, I don't know where we play a role in that. I don't know if we do play a role in that. I don't know. That's why I'm trying to figure out how we fit in that mix. But I will tell you, back to what I was saying earlier, and I'm putting all this in an email now, but what I will tell you is, when I was dealing, I think I emailed you, I had multiple suicides and then multiple attempts. And when I went over there and talked to the senior leaders in the mental health department over at Portsmouth Naval Hospital, and realistically what they told me was, and I'm not trying to degrade anybody, but they were like, hey, this generation just doesn't have the mental fortitude, or they can't deal with it. They can't deal with some of the frustrations. Again, I see you shaking your head. I'm not saying wrong or right. I understand that. What I will tell you is what they perceived, and again, they're more my generation. What they had the biggest problem with, and this is where we could probably come into, is the Navy in this area has divested their medical professionals. They've kind of bumped some of that to civilian providers, and like the mental hospital portion, the mental hospital piece, they only have a couple of people on staff. And to get people in, unless you're, I'm not kidding you, unless you're somebody getting ready to pull the trigger, they're going to give you a chit, and they're going to say, hey, come back whenever we get you in. And that's where we're stuck. And I have called Military One Source. I've called De-Stress. I've called Fleet and Family. I've worked with all of them. There's one resource, I forgot her name, I've used here on the base. She's really good. She'll come to your location and talk to she'll pull my Marine out, pull him to the side, and they'll go somewhere and talk. And it kind of works. But it's that part of, I hate saying this, but everybody says it will help, but it's actually helping. That's the problem we run into over there. And what I'm putting in here, what I would like to see, and I don't know how much of that is overstepping our bounds, but is really, if we can help facilitate, because we have, like the Norfolk CSB, I mean, we got a lot of mental health professionals. I saw a lot of people on there on the chat. And if we could just teach some of our mid-level managers, our NCOs, and just how to deal with, some of these kids. And I'll tell you, I think Jason Moore, I saw him shaking his head earlier when I mentioned that. It's teaching our generation how to communicate better with that generation, the younger generation. Because like I said, I'm not kidding you. I can take you in the barracks right now. And that place, I don't know when you were in the barracks. When I was in the barracks, it was a party all the time. It was noise. There was something going on all the time. If I take you over there right now, you won't hear one noise. That place is a ghost town, because they're all sitting around with headphones on. They're playing their video games, and their quality of life now, where it used to be when I was first in the Marine Corps, there was 4 of us in a room. Now there's 2 of them, and they're what's called, Jason Moore, were you in the military? Yeah. I don't know how recent you're in there, but now over here they have this pod construct where basically every person almost has their own space, because they're trying to give everybody their own space. And although that sounds great, what it really creates is isolation.
Further isolation, right?
Right. Yeah. And these kids, like I said, they come in, they want to be a part of the team. They want, because I get to interview them over here before they join. And I can't wait. They get in here, and I go to the barracks, and then, they got those Beats by Dre on, whatever headphones on or whatever Bose, it don't matter what brand. And they're just playing a video game. And I walked into the roommate and I said, hey, what's going on with so-and-so?
Don't even know.
I didn't know he was over there. I promise you. They don't talk. Like I've tell them a lot of old war stories. Hey, me and my roommates, we used to go out and play basketball every night. Do what? Yeah. Right. They just don't do it. And again, I'm not trying to say, old dog, new dog, but it's teaching the older dogs how to communicate better with the younger dogs, and teaching those younger dogs how to play better, because they just don't do it. I mean, I have a teenager. I'm telling you, unless it's on this, they're not talking.
No, exactly. I've got a son who's 26 is still like that. And it is, and I don't blame that on that generation. We're largely to blame for that too, with what we've put in everybody's hands and trained them how to use it. You're right though, especially when you're talking about teamwork, and that's one thing we tried to do in the in the JROTC units was, instill a lot of teamwork and drill and all the, navigating and all that kind of stuff, orienteering, and just, something to get them working together with. But yeah, you're right.
Okay.
I don't know if we can definitely come together and get some kind of something for active duty. These kids that need to get out of this isolated state. And
I'm not saying we have the solution. Don't get me wrong. I don't expect us to go over there and do that. They have people, and that's what I'm saying. They have people over there that do that, but it's finding that bridge and possibly helping them out, because I'm just telling you, they just don't have the depth and mental health professionals over there to deal with it. And there's a huge disconnect from Naval Station Portsmouth is way over there and me at my unit over here. It's huge. Like you're talking about, and like I said, go ahead, Brandon.
I was gonna say, one of the things we know we need to do is we need to get people sitting in a room and where they're talking, and it's not just us. Like, I don't need to breathe more of Whit's air. Like, I breathe enough of his air and all of that. But if you've got your connections at your unit, we need to invite maybe one of them to come over. Get an officer of some kind, somebody that comes over, and we start to have that community-based and active duty conversation. And I think there's probably room for some pilot type of opportunities. You bring a civilian in that has some conversation with guys about, the old conversation was your battle buddy, right? And so battle buddy can mean a lot of things, but when you're having in that relationship, instead of being divided in your own little pod, you got somebody that at least you can share your crap with. And so, thinking about those and how do we do some messaging around that, and what can you take on base that helps to facilitate some of that, things that we know are protective factors, or just, if we speak CSB language, we're talking risk and protective factors. And we know that there are certain protective factors that you can do that are just really simple strategies of decreasing isolation, increasing conversation, and then making available services and supports to folks, so that they know that my only option is not Naval Station Portsmouth, or is not the medical facility. It's, you can actually walk into Norfolk CSB or Western Tidewater CSB or something and say, I'm struggling, I don't know what to do, and somebody's going to be there to help you.